I'm going to go ahead and do that. So you should see that message pop up. All right, now I'm going to share my screen. For those of you who just joined us, welcome again to our DQUAC training today. All right, so I'm just going to actually just keep in this minimized button. But so these are our community commitments today. The first one is to monitor your tech self. So what I mean by that is ideally mute yourself when you're not speaking. It helps cut down on our background noise. And also just for me, I know that I'm easily distracted. And so if I have other screens up or other things, I also have my work email, it's hard to stay fully engaged in the session. So I encourage you, if you're able, to sort of turn off those screens and just participate fully in our session today. Next is to be patient. So as I mentioned, this is relatively new for DQUAC to be offering online trainings. And so we are all learning. Some of us have more experience than others in terms of the Zoom world. And so feel free to just sort of give yourself some grace and some patience with us and with each other as we kind of navigate this new space together. The next is to engage with curiosity. So just like our trainings that happen in person in DQUAC, we are also encouraging you to participate fully in this session. So ask questions, share ideas, utilize that chat box if you want to be able to connect with other people. And if you have any questions or need additional resources, please let us know. But feel free to sort of engage like you would in an in-person session. And the last is to take care, to do what you need to take care of yourself. So as I mentioned earlier, we are asking people to turn their screens on. If you have a distraction in your household, totally understand, and you need to step away for a moment, run to the bathroom, do what you need to take care of yourself. You can go ahead and turn your screen off and then turn it back on when you return. So those are sort of our norms for DQUAC today. And we're just really excited to be able to have this session, which feels so relevant for all that we're experiencing. So I am going to now turn things over to Adam Kohlberg, who is the actually interim ED of Pop Culture Classroom. He's going to lead you through this session today. I will be here sort of helping with tech and organizing some of the Zoom things. And so if you need anything, feel free to send me a direct message, especially if there's any tech problems or issues with sound or other things. Feel free to message me. But otherwise, I'm going to turn things over to Adam.
Hey, everybody. How are we all doing? Give me a wave. We're doing good. Awesome. Well, this is a new world that we're in, so thank you for kind of jumping in and being willing to talk a little bit about ways to support team building during this interesting and unprecedented time in our kind of cultural and social history. So I'm really excited to talk to you today just about team building in the virtual world. Before I kind of start sharing my screen, thought I'd give you a little sense of what I look like, so it's not just my sort of voice over the top the whole time. I am, as Melanie mentioned, the interim executive director for Pop Culture Classroom. I also serve most of the year as education director. So if you don't know about Pop Culture Classroom, we are a nonprofit based out of Denver. We do a lot of educational work around graphic novels, comics, board games, video games, film and television, essentially trying to find ways to build bridges between what's fun and what kids are interested in at home and also what's kind of available in the classroom. So we raise most of our proceeds from our event that we do each year, Denver Pop Culture Con. So that's kind of maybe what you've heard of as well in terms of our big annual event. And then as you kind of know from attending the session, you're here is also part of the DQUAC Connection series. So, our team at DQUAC is really trying hard to find ways to keep professional development and trainings going during this time. And so thank you for being willing to kind of take a chance and try this out with us. And we're really just excited to have you all here. And we're going to do some fun stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and kind of go through the presentation. As Melanie mentioned, like any questions, we can get to them at the end. Melanie might be able to address them in real time in the chat. So please just feel free to reach out to her directly or send something out to the group if you have questions. And then, yeah, I think other than that, I think we're ready to jump in. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Excellent. All right, so we are here to talk about team building in the virtual world. Get myself situated here. So we talked a little bit about the community commitments. For those of you who might have just joined us, just going to take a quick second to pause here and allow you to check these one more time, or maybe if you missed it. And please do feel free to engage and ask questions at any point. Okay, great. So to get right into it, we're about to get into an activity in a second, but I really want to jump in with just some expectations and some sense of what we're doing today. So it's a strange new world, as I mentioned. So we're in a new norm, right? Virtual meetings are now kind of the main way that we're connecting as organizations and staff. Organizations across the world, we're being presented with these new challenges and ways to support staff building. So today, there's two things that we're really going to kind of try and discuss. The first of which is, as managers and members of staff, how do we navigate these new environments in order to provide team building experiences and counteract the isolation, fatigue, burnout, and other common stressors that we face in kind of a virtual space? And then also what tips, tricks, and resources are out there to help us empower and motivate staff members, set a positive, collaborative, and welcoming culture during virtual meetings, and keep our staff feeling engaged. So kind of what we're going to be doing today essentially is kind of looking at this, right? For me, this screen is terrifying. This screen, when I look at it sort of from the front side, I don't know what I would possibly do. And I'm actually facing one of the first times I've had a screen of actual Zoom callers with the same amount of people on it, which is also terrifying. But the idea is that there's ways to manage this space. There's ways to make it actually serve for the interests of your organization, and maybe even help provide you ways to engage with your staff that you haven't thought of before. So the terror that you might feel at something like this, we're hoping to talk about today, or maybe the anxiety, and just discuss maybe ways to kind of counteract it, and maybe keep all of these folks that you might have in your hypothetical chat engaged and excited and happy. So what we're going to do today. So I want to talk a little bit about our plans for today and also some of the expectations. So first thing we're going to do is set expectations and do some warm welcomes as a group. The second thing we'll be doing is common issues that we face in this virtual world and activities that we can use to address them. And then the third piece is going to be following up and some optimistic closure. So the way I want to run this meeting is sort of how I imagine anyone could run a team building session. I'm thinking about team building as this kind of way of engaging staff, not just as these special opportunities that happen on a case-by-case basis, but team building can be happening with every single individual meeting you have, with every aspect of your meeting, and then you can also provide those sort of special experiences to support those too. So we're going to be looking not only at kind of the special things to do with your staff, but we're going to be actually activating and looking at ways you can engage your staff in 5-10 minute quick sessions that help break up some of this monotony, some of this virtual space, and actually give you a little more sense of ownership and buy-in to the process, and maybe get your staff a little more excited and on board with whatever you might be talking about. So obviously we'll follow up with a Q&A, and then Melanie will kind of be helping along the way to provide some prompts for some of our activities. And then also we'll have a short survey at the end, just so you have that on your radar. So we'll ask you to fill that out, please. All right. So to jump in, the first thing that we're going to be doing today is basically doing a short survey. So it's going to have 4 sections on it, 4 options. And what we're trying to do is get a sense of where the group is at in terms of what are you struggling most with right now in terms of the 4 biggest obstacles that most people face with virtual trainings. And so those 4 things are communication, engagement, collaboration, and motivation. So just go ahead and take a second to look those over, fill that out. And then once we kind of get enough responses there, what we're going to do is we're going to break everyone out into small groups. So what I'd ask you to do in those small groups is essentially, there's going to be some prompts provided from the DQUAC team, Melanie specifically. And it's just 5 different groups, and each group is going to have a different warm welcome activity, sort of an icebreaker that they're going to be able to do. So what I'd like you to do is kind of do those warm welcomes, and then select a member of your group to come back and talk about what that experience was like and how you think it might help with kind of starting off meetings and how it supports team building. So with that, go ahead and take a look at the poll, go ahead and fill it out. And Melanie's going to go ahead and split us into 5 different groups. You should have about 4 or 5 members in each of the groups. Go ahead and introduce yourself and say hello, and we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. All good, Melanie?
Yes, so I'm gonna go ahead, and it looks like almost everyone has filled out the poll, so I'll go ahead and end that poll. Adam, would you like me to share the results with everyone now?
Yes, please.
Awesome, you should see this pop up.
Okay.
So it looks like most of the votes came in for engagement, then motivation, then collaboration, then communication. All right. So I'm going to break everyone up into breakout rooms, as Adam mentioned. And so you're going to get an invitation that pops up on your screen. So you have to actively join that breakout room. And then if there are any kind of issues or questions about what we're doing, you can go ahead and kind of request help from the main room. Adam and I are going to stay here. So if you have any questions, you can kind of come back to that main room space. So I'm going to go ahead and open these rooms. All right.
And just keep an eye on those chat boxes, please. What I wanted to kind of do is just have like one representative from each of the breakout groups, just kind of talk about the experience of the warm welcome and just like any feedback on why they think this is a good way to build some team camaraderie and also some morale. So let's go with group number 1. Start with there and just go through 2 through 5. And
Hey, Adam, this is Robert. We didn't really talk about who was going to be our speaker, but I figured I'd jump in because I like to. I think a lot of the topic we were talking about is our ancestors, or what we might learn now from the past. And Mary Lou talked about helping. Caitlin talked about learning. Yvette talked about teaching. So being who we are as educators and providers in our communities already, it didn't surprise me that was kind of the topic of the whole warm welcome. And I did appreciate it because I know Yvette, but I didn't know Caitlin or Mary Lou, so it was cool to have that connection and know that we were all on the same page.
great, thank you, and great feedback. Group 2.
All right, we also didn't discuss who was gonna talk, but one thing that I liked about this and that I noticed is that it's good to ask questions where people can like kind of talk about themselves or about something that is kind of important to them, or something that they have found meaning in during this time. I think it helps people to be a little bit more engaged than maybe just a generic type of question. Or game maybe that could be played sometimes when we do warm welcomes when we're face-to-face. So that's just something that I noticed. I don't know if anyone else from my group wanted to add anything else.
Nailed it, Britta.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you. Group 3.
We also didn't talk about who would present.
It's like natural selection,
Yeah. Well, we had 2 folks that knew each other, and then me and one person whose mic didn't work, so we were using the chat box too. But we just did pretty quick introductions and went through our questions and had some things in common for sure among people working with schools. So I think that's it.
Great. All right, well, group number 4.
Y'all are killing me. We redacted all of our questions. We decided we didn't want to talk about them. And we talked about other things in our group. Our question was very like surfacey. It was about condiments and what one we did not like. And we all decided that wasn't what we wanted to talk about. So we did it. And we talked about other things instead. Would that be accurate? Thumbs up, group 4? Yeah.
Hey, that works. Whatever makes the welcome the warmest, right? So that's great. I was interested to see how that, it was condiment smackdown. It was, you have to come out with a unanimous decision on the best condiment, but it didn't seem like it landed very well. So, all right. So to close out group number 5, if you want to share a little bit of feedback and just thoughts. Anybody from group 5?
I think we were actually group 5. I'm not sure who was group 3, but we did talk a little bit about problems in team building over virtual platforms, and really communication was key. Moving staff through different processes, and the best feedback that we got was really asking the questions and challenging and providing accountability for follow through. I think building that trust with them, and making them feel like they can stand on their own 2 feet and move forward. It's very different from being together at site.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I think I'm going to transition back to the shared screen, but just a couple things that kind of came up, I think, in some of the feedback was, we're having conversations, even though these are simple, like very straightforward activities, they often bleed into more emotional, like supportive conversations, which I think is an important piece of this, and something that just to be mindful of, just to allow that space for your staff and to provide those sort of natural team building elements to occur kind of on an ongoing real-time basis. And then, what I also heard was that, sometimes the prompts don't necessarily fit what the necessity of the conversation is. And so being flexible and being willing to adapt, and also being kind of specific to your needs of your organization to support team building. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen and talk a little bit about kind of why we want to structure, I think, some of our team building elements this way. So 1 second. Okay, should everybody should see that now. So basically, as I said at the beginning, like we're talking today kind of about how to build team and staff culture, and how to support your staff kind of on an ongoing meeting by meeting basis. So regardless of whether this is a fun event or something that's like a traditional meeting, a great team building kind of strategy is to set really clear expectations and then provide a chance for these sort of warm welcomes. And I know this is sort of saying things that a lot of our folks already know on this call, but it's kind of like going on a plane. You always get the little spiel at the beginning of the plane ride, right? Even though it feels redundant, even though you might tune out. So the idea is that, if you can kind of create that energy at the beginning, create kind of some structure, there'll be a lot of expectation and buy-in as you go in. So just a couple things about setting expectations. The things that you really want to focus on to kind of get the team's trust, respect, and buy-in for the meeting at hand, or whatever the process might be, just setting really clear ground rules, setting clear goals for the meeting, where you're going to arrive by the end of it. Getting an agenda down, that can be sent out beforehand if it's extensive, but especially sending something out in the early parts of the meeting to let people know when you'll be transitioning. It's also really clear, it's important to set up when you'll have breaks, when you'll allow for certain elements of conversation, and then really a timeline. So if you're looking at trying to get things done within an hour or 30 minutes, I find one of the biggest things that I struggle with virtual meetings, and which might come up today, and I will try my best not to ramble on, is the rambling that happens typically when people don't have that social cues and feedback that they need to kind of understand that their point has been made. So they'll kind of keep going through things. So sometimes there's a point where managing that timeline becomes a little more of kind of an overt thing that you need to do versus maybe just something at the beginning where you say, we have 60 minutes, hard stop. So setting clear expectations is really important. But then I always, in a team building environment, transition directly into warm welcome. So here's the ground rules, here's what we're gonna do today. But first we wanna give everyone a chance to sort of get acquainted, meet each other, you know, whether this is within your staff or with people outside of your staff and you're trying to do something fun. The kind of key things to think about with warm welcomes, regardless of which ones you do, whether they're prompted, unprompted, loosely organized, or super formal, is something creative, something that gets the juices flowing, something that's unique. So it shouldn't feel like something that every, you know, as much as I love two truths and a lie, who else has done that more than a dozen times in meetings, like over the course of the last decade? I mean, or the icebreaker of the question that you've heard a million times. So creating kind of a unique and engaging way to kind of get staff to hit on some things that are unexpected. So even if it's a negative reaction, so for example, the condiment fight that we sort of prompted, even if it's negative, that isn't in and of itself a conversation. And sometimes the best kinds of conversation are around like a mutual thing that everyone agrees on, even if that mutual thing is, this thing annoys me and I don't like it. So also making sure that it's relevant. So what is your staff struggling with? What's on the front of mind? How much have they been stressed lately? Can you provide something that tackles those things? Something energizing, something quick, 5 to 15 minutes max, because you want to make sure you're able to get into the meat of the meeting or to the next activity. And as we all found kind of, I think in this first round, we have to be willing to adapt. So it's really important that you don't provide an activity or a warm welcome that removes someone from the equation. So if video is required to do your warm welcome, then everyone needs to make sure they have video capacity before you plan that and put it into kind of the mix. Or there needs to be an option to adapt it for a telephone basis. So just thinking kind of about those things as when you're planning out your warm welcomes and how to make them kind of unique and fun. And I think the trouble with virtual meetings is that we're having to do this work more frequently. It's becoming more of a burden, I think, feeling like we need to prompt these things at the beginning of every discussion. So even though they are replacing those little moments that you have in the office of like a coffee break or a lunch break or a conversation you have with someone about the new streaming show you watch, doing it kind of in a formal way just always makes it feel a little forced. So that's why kind of just finding weird, zany, unique things that you can adapt are always a really good option. So with that, I wanted to kind of jump into the next section, which is talking a little bit about common issues that we face within our organization, within our staff, in terms of team building. And so what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about these common issues, and then we'll break out again into groups and give you a chance to basically take on one of these activities, create your own activity, and really think about how to be intentional when you're thinking about either doing staff culture building or team building as a manager, or maybe finding ways to connect with your fellow staff or your even your communities to do something fun and unique. So at the beginning of this, we kind of did a quick poll, right? So we decided that our common obstacles typically are communication, engagement, collaboration, and motivation. And so just to be sure we're on the same page, by communication, what that kind of typically means is, how are we effectively communicating virtually, right? How are we sharing ideas? How are we brainstorming? How are we coming to a consensus? So what are the platforms that you're using? How are they operating to best affect what you're trying to get across? And then is there a clear and consistent chain of communication that you can support through team building activities? Engagement is obviously something that most people had on their mind. So the engagement aspect is just, are your staff sitting there engaged in the conversation, or are they sending emails, or are they checking their phones, or are they actually participating, or are they sort of half involved? And so finding ways to up the engagement by doing things that maybe shift the script or provide some unexpected and unique things to do for them. Collaboration is really tough. Collaboration, how are you not only communicating as a team, but getting things done? And I think there's ways to support team building activities that help you be better at managing and fulfilling projects. So we'll talk about those. And then of course, motivation. So this was kind of number 2 on the list of people's concerns. And so motivation being, what are you doing to get your staff who are sitting at home in their pajamas, trying to sort of navigate this new virtual world in a lot of cases, or who aren't really fully engaged in sort of the process or in the office? How do you motivate them to get things done? How do you keep them kind of excited? How do you do things that provide them sort of a value add for their experience? So those are kind of the 4 keystone things we're going to talk about today. And then I think at the end, we can talk a little bit about other things we're struggling with as a group and individually that maybe can really help with certain pieces of these, but also kind of something else that we're not thinking of yet. And what I also want to say before we jump in is that these are all tied together. So I kind of separated out activities by, helping with specific obstacles, but, one is not going to necessarily just help, one activity doesn't help one category. They're going to definitely cross over. So just keep that in mind as we discuss, and also as you're doing some of these activities in real time. So just going to check our chat. Awesome. Okay, so let's start with communication. So I really want to do kind of a list here just to kind of throw some ideas out onto the table. And then we'll do one of these kind of as a group in a little bit, but some really specific and simple, free, easy ways to support communication skills. Coffee and conversations. My wife, every morning, 30 minutes, her and her staff meet for coffee. They talk about the articles they read, they talk about the workday it had, they really just share ideas and brainstorm. So something very loose, unstructured. Some of you already might be doing this. Similar, lunch and learn, right? Cook lunch together, get together, have a discussion. Happy hour, drinks, and those sort of things can be really helpful as well. And then some other kind of more strategic and kind of planned activities is like this versus that. So presenting your staff with a quick, immediate poll or a quick, immediate choice that they have to make about Superman or Wonder Woman or Batman or Star Trek. And the weirder and zanier, the better, just to kind of break up the flow and maybe have them give a chance to speak to like what their interests are, what their passions are. And you can even make it specific to work. So it could be empathy versus, productivity. Like what is the more important value there? And have them discuss it. And that's a great way to kind of hit on maybe some things that you're trying to support with your staff. You can also do like a live streaming movie night, a sip and paint, a sip and draw, a sip and get together and do something. There's ways that you can actually buy kits that you can invest in and do kind of a specific painting activity, or you can DIY it and just grab a piece of paper and a pencil and put a topic up and have everybody draw a caricature or an image and see how you kind of come out. And that can be something really loosely organized and fun. And then something that we'll also kind of tackle today in one of the groups is show and tell. So pick something weird, unique, fun, really relatable, and show it off. So we've done for our organization, pet show and tell. Meet your pets, right? We've done like a special object or a book. We've done kind of a reading club type thing. So those are all things that you can do really quickly and easily, and they can all operate as a separate event, or you can do them within the scope of a larger meeting. So that's kind of communication stuff. And we'll have a little chance to talk about this in groups as well as kind of collectively in a bit. But just to jump forward, engagement. So our thinking here is like, how do we get our staff engaging with each other and interested in not only what they're working on, but what they're doing in each other's lives, right? So some really great ways to do that are roundups, recipes, what are you watching, what are you reading, just kind of getting a list together of ways that staff are staying safe, healthy, entertained during this crazy time. And that can continue on past when, the quarantine ends. You can have like a weekly roundup, a bi-weekly roundup. These are all really fun, quick and easy ideas that you can do to kind of see, interesting things about other people. It could even be like, an interesting experience that they had that week, anecdotes. One of the things that we like to do is a commiseration corner. Some of you might have this happening naturally in your conversations with staff, but basically, how do you get together and just say, I got a bone to pick, right? And it doesn't need to be something super serious. It can be the simplest of things. Like our last one was how long YouTube board game videos are. Why does it take an hour to teach you how to play a board game that's supposed to take 30 minutes? That's just crazy to me. So we talked about that for a bit. There's other things that people kind of brought to the table. You know, I have a bone to pick about Zoom. I have a bone to pick about this. So it's kind of a fun way just to like break up the kind of, it's to give people a chance to vent, but not in a way that kind of brings down the staff. And it also gets out some of that negative energy, which can sometimes be very front and center, but sometimes a little bit behind the scenes when you're working virtually. Any sort of media club that you can get together, film, television, books. You can do something with a board game club, you know, whatever you want to do, setting up a weekly check-in on that, something really loosely organized. You can do it also as a really specific thing where you meet once a week and do something really fun or play something together. Some other really quick things, trivia. There's free trivia questions out there everywhere. You can do a costume contest, wear your zaniest hat, wear your favorite movie or television outfit thing that you can find in your house. So I've got my Star Trek shirt. I got my Wonder Woman vest. So I'm going to talk about that, and we're going to do a quick costume contest, maybe to up the ante with a small prize. You can also do like a virtual tour of each other's houses. You can do like MTV Cribs, if anyone remembers that show. So basically like tour the office, tour of your space, tour of like some interesting part of your life. Let's learn a little bit about who you are, and let's learn a little bit about what your life looks like at home. You can also do something a little simpler. If people are like, I don't want to show off my messy house, guess who? Everybody sends in a story or an experience or a factoid about themselves. And it's sort of like two truths and a lie where everybody has to guess like who did this thing or whose baby photo is this. And then a final one that's super easy, which we'll actually do today, is to choose a background. So choose your favorite show, television, maybe a book background, whatever it might be, and put it up on your Zoom and then talk about it. So super easy way. It can even be a warm welcoming ritual if you want to do that. But, you know, you can also do one where like everybody has the same background for your happy hour. So you're all doing Cheers happy hour, or you're all doing Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So just some things to think about. So next is collaboration. So again, kind of talking about how do we get staff working together and creating content, creating, finishing meeting deadlines, finishing projects, goals, whatever it might be. So one of the really quick and easy ways to do this on an ongoing basis is assign people roles during meetings. And it doesn't need to be like really formal. Like you can have a competition where the note taker is the person who has the fastest typing speed, or your timekeeper can literally have a stop clock, and you can make it kind of fun and interesting and have props involved. And really you can have someone assigned for each of those team building elements that you want to support during the meeting. So if you want someone in charge of setting up the warm welcome, the optimistic closure, putting together an activity, it's a great way to get some engagement and buy-in from your staff, and also make sure that, you know, your staff is kind of working in front and behind the scenes to kind of create and develop products, kind of in a more loosely defined way, but then that hopefully helps contribute to some of their collaboration, you know, amongst that virtual world for doing work projects. As you've seen here, the breakout rooms are kind of an underutilized but really great thing that you can do with Zoom especially. I know there's other platforms that offer breakout rooms, but basically sending people out with different activities into different rooms, giving them goals, giving them an idea, even doing some sort of competition. Virtual escape rooms are getting pretty popular. So a quick Google search can find you tons of free and paid opportunities for that. It's a great way to kind of increase your collaborative and communication skills while still doing kind of something fun and unique. Virtual Pictionary and charades, another great, just quick break, 10, 15 minutes. You can do a quick round of Pictionary, charades, have a prize associated with it, break into teams, whatever you feel is the best option there. Exquisite Corpse is sort of a very morose name for essentially just creating a story together. So each person says like 1 or 2 lines of the story, and you go around in a circle. Super easy to do, super quick. So another option is Mad Libs, which you can do super easy as well. And then just kind of a larger scale thing that you can do to support, you know, team building and staff culture is just building kind of a virtue culture committee. So who might be your staff members who either are excited about this or maybe need a little more buy-in into virtual experiences that you can put together and say, hey, you know, we're looking at the next couple months of needing to provide some content and some fun and some engagement over our platforms. You all are in charge of kind of figuring out ways to do that. Here are some goals, here's some timelines. So that's a really great way to kind of increase collaboration and then, of course, incentivize folks to be involved. And last but not least, motivation. This one, as I kind of pointed out, was the second most concerning for folks in the poll. So really what I think motivation boils down to is how do you get people excited to come to work virtually? How do you get them excited to go out of a meeting, you know, virtually, you know, excited to take on the next project or deadline? So something really easy is a challenge or competition. You know, that can range from like, if you're on time to the meeting every day each week, you get something, or it could be something even more targeted, like we're going to do a trivia contest, and then, you know, we're going to give a prize of $20 for a local restaurant, or donate some money to your cause. So those are great ways to get people motivated, change up the narrative a bit, give them some chance to kind of compete and communicate with each other in different ways. Another great motivation tool is always ending with kudos. So what's special? What do you want to spotlight? What's unique and what's valuable about your team that you can continue to share out? And again, I think that this is something where I feel like you have to be kind of the cheesy kind of maybe, I don't know, parental figure in this case, where regardless of how many times you say it, you continue to give those kudos and you continue to kind of end the meetings with this really positive, empowering note, because even though maybe your staff is getting a little tired of it, or maybe they're a little, you know, burnt out on all the excitement and whatever it might be, it's still something that I think is a good tool to kind of set your staff out into a more positive environment leaving the meeting. Bringing in special guests. This is just something as simple as like, let's bring in spouses and let's meet them. Bring in kids. It could also be like, we're going to invite so-and-so to come to our meeting and talk a little bit about, you know, how awesome X, Y, or Z thing is, or, you know, you've got a trivia like person that you bring in to run a trivia game or something like that. So whoever might be someone that your staff would love to see or talk to, you know, this virtual world provides us a chance to bring in people to meetings that maybe we haven't tried before or haven't had a chance to meet staff. Another one is what I call punishments, which you might have seen in various ways, but the idea is in a punishment, if you're late to a meeting, if you're not prepared for something, you have to sing a song, you have to do a crazy dance. So this is a great way to incentivize showing up on time, being engaged, listening attentively. So, you know, hey, I'm going to send something crazy out over the chat. And if you respond in 10 seconds, you know, this is going to happen. Or if you don't, then you have to, you know, go and do something crazy. So kind of like a truth or dare or something like that. But this is a great way to, again, motivate your staff to kind of be on time, engaged, excited about the meeting without really having to kind of drill into them this idea of like, you know, how everything is going to be set up. So a couple more things, list goals categories. So having them build a list of things they're passionate about, what they value. So this can be fun of like your favorite books, or it could be a list of, you know, the most heartwarming things that you've seen this week, right? So go with any direction there. When you give folks a break, it's often really great to give them a prompt. So when you come back from break, I want to talk about what you want to do when all this is over, your favorite thing that you want to return to after quarantine. And just give people a motivating tool in the interim between your meetings, whether it's between meetings or within a break, to just say, hey, keep thinking about things. Keep keep trying to find ways to provide, connection opportunities for that staff, even when they're not necessarily directly connected. So kind of put that in their brains as they go out into the world and come back. And then something a little more crazy, depending on your staff, and I say crazy because my staff would never be down for this, but group yoga and meditation. So sometimes just ending with like, if you've done yoga sessions before, ending with like, kind of a moment or a moment of silence, a moment of Zen, a chance to just reflect. That can be a really great tool to kind of keep the staff motivated, engaged, to give them something that keeps them active either during a break or maybe in the middle of the meeting itself. Even something as simple and kind of dumb as like group stretch. Everybody get up, do a stretch. All right, I'm going to lead you through 3 stretches. Here's the such and such stretch. So all great opportunities, again, to show your staff that you're seeing where they're at, that they can trust you to be mindful of their capacity and their virtual experience, and that you're being intentional about the team building that you're providing because you're thinking about what their needs are. So with that, I think I'm still on time. Hello. We're going to jump into another small group activity. So I'll run through it really quickly, and then I'll ask Melanie to kind of split everyone up. But basically, each of you is going to get 15 minutes to do a team building activity that hits on one of the 4 different categories. So there'll be a little bit of overlap for a couple. So what you're going to do is you're going to split into groups. You're going to conduct those team building activities. You're going to discuss how you think this supports one or more of the obstacles listed and how, or if it doesn't, then let us know. Develop, and then I want you to talk a little bit about what would be an activity that you didn't see on the list or that you wish was on the list that you would love to see to help, say, for communication or for engagement. So kind of creating an activity and pitching it out to the group is a crowdsourcing. And then number 4, just as a reminder, please select a member of your group to be your representative to share up kind of your thoughts and also your activity idea. And unless there's any super urgent questions, I think what we'll do is just split everyone out. So we'll do 5 groups again, and Melanie will be sending you an invite shortly. And then we'll see you again right around about 11:15. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Yeah, so I'm about to split you up again. Just so you know, these are different groups than the first breakout groups that we sent you into. So you should see new faces. Also, this screen is not going to be available to you once you're in your breakout room. So if you want to take a quick picture of the screen, the prompts, or write them down, I'll be, again, coming into each room and sharing sort of more details about what your group is specifically doing. So give you a second to go ahead and take that picture or write down those prompts. And then I'll send you out into your groups. And while you're waiting for me to kind of pop in, if you just want to kind of introduce yourselves to your new breakout room folks, then you can go ahead and do that. All right, so here we go. All right, just sent out the thing.
Each group just about the experience. So what I'd ask your representatives to kind of share out is just what was your activity that you did? What was the experience? How do you feel like it fit into kind of the larger goals, maybe to addressing an obstacle? And then the third piece was, what was your sort of idea for another activity that you would be able to do to kind of hit on the same obstacle? So let's go in reverse order this time. So we'll start with breakout group 5 and move down. So if our representative from group 5 wants to jump in.
Okay, lovely. Not that I was prepared for going opposite, but okay, here we are. So our group, we had to choose 3 things, everyday objects in our home that would, and explain our feelings around, what they represented to us and why we chose them. So how that fits in for us, we felt that it was a good feelings exercise. It was a good way to meet people in a different way. So we see names, we heard introductions, but with having them present their individual objects and why they chose them, some of them had some significant sentimental reasons behind them. And so that was really nice. So we got to see another side of people that we don't know, because we all are strangers to each other. So we're not familiar with each other before today. So we felt another type of connection. And let me see, what else did you want to know now? Just remind me.
Just the activity that you had maybe brainstormed to address another one that we haven't talked about.
So we decided not to choose another one because we wanted to expound on the one we had. We really liked it, so we dug a little deeper into the reasons behind we chose those different things and what they meant to us and where we were right about now and how we were feeling. So like for Sandra, she found a cup during this pandemic time that it was a mother and daughter cup shared from years and years and years ago that she had lost for like 15 years. But here, because of pandemic cleaning, she found that cup. So that connection was really special to her. Mary Lou had the hourglass, had an hourglass, and the hourglass for her represented time that she was missing with friends and family and outdoors and being able to do the things she did. And oh my goodness, our third person is Kelly Kate. Oh, please, where is she? Remind me of her name. I'm so sorry, I can't remember. It starts with a K though.
Chris.
Where are you? There she is, Chris. Hello, Miss Rollerson. All right then. So Chris had not a journal, but a prayer book kind of sort of. And so that is something that she feels special. She hasn't had time to really do it. And she's invited her group, who they haven't exactly taken up the invitation, but she still turns on her Zoom every morning and she's hoping that somebody's going to join her in prayer every morning. That's that. So we found those things to be very special to us. And so we kind of stayed in that mode and we did not choose another activity. Sorry, Adam.
No, I mean, that's part of the goal, I think, is to just adapt and be flexible. So thanks for sharing. For those of you who are curious about the activity that she was mentioning, the show and tell, which was intended to kind of support communication, I dropped kind of the text that we had sent out to that group into the everyone chat. So you can kind of get a little bit of a model of something you can do really quickly and easily at your organization. And I'll do that for each group as well. So for group 4, thank you, by the way, for that feedback. And group 4, if you want your representative to jump in. This is that.
Patrice, did you want to share? Okay.
I thought you were going to share and I'll show the activity.
Okay. Okay, cool. So we got a this versus that activity where you had 2 items and you're supposed to pick one that you wanted to defend, and then everybody had to kind of vote on which item they preferred, I guess. Ultimately, our group did not do that activity, but we talked about that activity and how for us, none of those things really resonated very much, so we weren't super engaged in doing it, but that brought up the idea that you could do that activity, but it's really important to think about the audience that you're working with and try to get feedback and information from your teammates, and just like the idea that you might think something is fun or that something everyone is aware of, they might not be. And so when you're planning these type of activities to really maybe get feedback from people or suggest multiple activities that people could choose that they would want to do. And then lastly, we touched on just like the ideas of having laughter, authentic conversations, and then being vulnerable in these conversations. So those are kind of some of the things we talked about. And then Therese will share the activity that we came up with.
The activity we came up with is called Doodle Me. And what you do is you have your staff have a piece of paper and pencil, and with during your meeting, let them doodle, and then they share at the end of the meeting.
Great. Well, thank you all.
Is that doodle me, like you're drawing me or drawing anything?
Just drawing anything they want to doodle.
Yeah, and I have a bunch of resources and links in the final slide, and one of them is actually like a online drawing platform that you can play Pictionary or doodling activities like over a shared platform. So that's a great point, and thanks for bringing that up. And yeah, thanks for the feedback. I I do think that we'll talk a little bit about making things relevant, timely to your staff. And I think that's a great point, and also being vulnerable. So yeah, thank you. So let's go ahead and jump into group 3, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Zach. I'm representing group 3 with Michaela, Jamie, and Deborah. So just making sure that I'm following the prompt here. Our activity that we did was a charades. So Melanie was able to come into our group chat and she gave us our prompt, and within that prompt it also gave us a website for each one in our group to actually go into, and it was a charade generator. So at the bottom of the screen it would generate a random charade word, and what was actually pretty cool about it is you could actually change the difficulty settings to a degree. So you could do an easy charade generated word, a moderate, hard, extremely hard, stuff like that. And so it would generate the word that you would see, and then you would act it out via your, the Zoom online platform, and then everybody else would engage in it. And so that was pretty fun. It was nice to do that with everybody. I can see just a little bit, though, how there can be some kind of hiccups in the fact that we have to go from our Zoom screen to another website or to additional screen that we need to see to generate that word. So that took a little bit of time just because we had to switch things around. Yeah, but it went really well, and we all had a really good time. It was nice to kind of break up the monotony a little bit. And then we didn't necessarily get to another activity that we would do, but I was just thinking of a few things. Is maybe you could do like an I Spy, because to me, what our charade, our virtual charades, so to speak, is kind of going back to that engagement obstacle that we had talked about, and how making sure that, whether we're with staff or with other coworkers and whatnot, that we kind of get out of our comfort zones. We do something that's fun and something that gets everybody involved. So maybe you could do an I Spy from home, where, if you're on your couch like I am right now, or you're at your dining room table, you can look around you, spy an item, and then try and describe it, and everybody else takes turns guessing what it would be. But yeah, that's what we did.
Great. Thanks, Zach. And thanks, group number 3. So let's go with group number 2, our Found Art group.
So the found art was under kind of motivation, and you kind of have your team members go out for 4 minutes, kind of around their home, find some different art materials, and then come back and give a minute to create art around the theme of life after quarantine. And what we had talked about, and I don't know if Katie wanted to share her creation she did with her daughter. So with some yarn and a toilet paper roll, so very creative.
It has seashells inside. She was very into the activity. So I was thinking, representing travel, how we can travel and do things after this, because trips have been canceled.
Thanks, Katie. And so what we had talked about for our team, specifically, I was speaking to my team who's mostly full of introverts and people who are, I'm not artsy. It's kind of their go-to. Other ways to motivate is kind of asking them around what brings you passion, why do we do this work, and things like that, to verbally have the motivation versus a physical art project. And Katie pointed out her team, who is super artistic, can turn this activity into kind of competition and make it kind of a competition and use their creative brains that way. So we talked about motivation in other forms during this time, as far as like sending notes of gratitude out to our team, thanks, for the work that they're doing, knowing it's a challenging time, that's kind of a safe way for us to acknowledge and motivate our team. We also talked about when we physically can be together to just verbally give that gratitude and that appreciation. If we're able to bring food, food is always a good motivation tool for our team members. So those are some things that we talked about during this time. And anyone else from our group, feel free to jump in if I missed anything.
All right, great. Sounds like we covered everything. Awesome. And I appreciate like that point about, you know, often these activities, if you provide kind of a loose theme or something that's kind of related to something going on that's in the world or in their lives, it opens up a lot of those conversations that sometimes have to be forced, but this is an opportunity to like have them happen naturally. So, you know, being thematic and being intentional, I think is really big. So thank y'all for sharing. All right, so last but not least, let's get our group number 1 to share out. They had a choose a background one, which some of you already might be familiar with.
All right, so your group 1, which was myself, Julia, Robert, and April, and we kind of talked more about
Did we lose our presenter, or is that just me? Raise your hand if we lost her. Okay.
So Kaylin has been challenged by the technology that Kaylin's using. So if she gets back, we'll let her jump in there. April actually led us through a 3-to-1. April, do you want to talk about the 3-to-1?
Yeah, I had a staff meeting last week, and I wanted staff to basically acknowledge 3 good things that has come out of this COVID thing and 1 bad thing. So basically outweighing the bad with the good. I've seen more kindness in Denver. I've seen more compassion from people. So I just have like a share out with staff about like 3-to-1, like give me your 3 and your 1 negative. And so it feels like it helps staff just acknowledge like it's not all bad.
For sure. So we shared some of our 3-to-1s. I think April's story was a 5-to-1, which is really an amazing story. Something that's very newsworthy. And then Adam, we also talked about how the choose a background, while a pretty cool opportunity, is different on different machines. So if you're not sure how to do it on your machine, it's leads you kind of out in the ether. And then some folks know what they're trying to do, but the machine can't get them there. And so we did talk about what our backgrounds would look like, but there's certainly a technological divide for some folks trying to engage with the background part.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think technology is a key thing to kind of keep in mind, and I wanted some of these to kind of be a little frustrating for folks because that's sort of the experience I think we've all had with online meetings, but especially when you're trying to provide something fun and engaging and unique, you don't want to have tech kind of be the thing that stops it. So that's a kind of a great point, I think, to lead into kind of just some tips and guidelines for kind of putting together activities and being intentional about them. So I'm actually going to share the screen again. We'll do a quick kind of closeout, and then we'll do optimistic closure and kind of end the session with some Q&A and resource discussion. So thanks again for all the groups kind of taking that on. I know that it's difficult sometimes in those breakout rooms, and everyone did a great job of kind of taking it taking a full swing at it. So thank you. All right, back to it. There we go. So just some things to really keep in mind as you're selecting activities that are relevant, that are really specific to your group of staff, regardless of whether you're managing staff involved in general meetings with staff or working with like a community group or something like that. Make sure that every activity is inclusive. There's options for everyone to get involved, phone, video, technology, right? And so that's something that's often really best to do as a check-in, like, hey, do we all have video options? hey, what's our bandwidth like? And so having kind of some, backups and things like that for team building, or just planning them to be very DIY. Something relevant, I've heard from the group, for example, of the this or that. Like if the options aren't relevant, there's no interest. So there's definitely some need to kind of think about, how do we get information from our staff? How do we prompt them? What are we going to do to get them engaged in this activity beyond just putting it out there into the universe? Make sure it's dynamic, so it should get people moving, talking, energized. It should be welcoming, so it shouldn't be intimidating. One of the things that typically I try to do to stop the fear component of some things, like draw a self-portrait. I'm not a drawer. I can't draw. I'm going to do this and that. So giving people 30 seconds or like 15 seconds to draw something can actually create better, sometimes engagement in products than giving them 4 minutes, because they'll just perseverate about it. So thinking about kind of setting timelines and goals intentionally as you go into activities. There should be some incentive. So what's the incentive for doing this? Is it a prize? Is it getting to know somebody better? Is it because this is exciting and fun? Is it because we need a break? So just making sure there's an incentive there. And then just something structured. So I tried to provide kind of in each of these activities a very basic, but a structure that you would be able to take on independently without me having to check in. So my hope is that that kind of came through in some of the guidelines, but that was kind of the goal of these sessions, is to show you that some of the pieces this year were missing while some of them were there in your sessions. So that's some things to think about. And just one more piece that I want to kind of point out. This is a little bit more like bird's eye view, but when you're thinking about activities, we have typically 5 elements that we share between human beings in terms of culture. So how do we find ways to support activities that hit on each of these 5 things, right? So are we including language, charades being the nonverbal, verbal being, talking through show and tell? What kind of symbols and objects are important to us that we can showcase for our members of our staff? What are some shared stories, some shared legends? Whether that's, we're all in this COVID thing, or remember that time when this happened, or did anyone watch the Spice Girls movie, like back in the day? Wasn't that crazy? So, it can be something very loose and kind of informal. Something to empower folks, something that gives them purpose, and then anything that you can set up as a ritual. So, don't forget there's holidays, there's birthdays, there's Friday happy hours that can become new rituals, or can become virtual rituals that you can move from the in-person space to the virtual space. So these are really great kind of keystone things to focus on as ways to find connections. And they kind of feed back into some of the activities and some of this related to kind of the general tips. So with that, what I wanted to do is kind of do a quick roundup of kind of how we would typically run kind of a optimistic closure, and what I think we want to do to support team building and follow up at the end of a meeting. So I'm going to go really quickly through these, and then what I'm going to actually ask you to do, since we're a little low on time, is actually share out some of those optimistic closures in the chat, as opposed to sharing them out in small groups. So there's a incorrect slide coming up, just be aware. So really, really important that you let staff know that you've heard them, that you've recognized what they've said, and it's important. And by doing all those things, what you're essentially doing is summarizing the conversation. So when you follow up at the end of a meeting, it's important, especially because we have varying degrees of engagement throughout the meeting, to summarize where we were, to discuss key points that came up, things that are still missing, the next steps that you want to have tackled, deadlines to achieve them, and who's responsible. And while this feels like not necessarily a team building element, and maybe feels a little bit more straightforward and strict, this will show that you have paid full attention to the conversation, that you have respected everyone's input, and that you have provided kind of a key, a milestone or some sort of like bullet pointed summary, so that people feel like they know what came out of that meeting collectively. And so I always say shared goals and shared responsibilities are the #1 way to ensure the best possible relationships between staff. And doing them virtually is a little bit harder, but it's just something where it requires having a scribe or someone writing these down. So then after you do a follow-up, I always encourage, optimistic closures. So what these typically are they're very loosely organized. They're typically kind of depending on the situation at hand, but they should kind of hit 5 things, right? They should be reflective kind of about what's going on in people's lives or the meeting. They should be forward thinking. So I know that's kind of it seems kind of like those are at odds with each other, but you know, what have we learned and what are we going to do to put that into action for the next phase of whatever we might be doing? So forward thinking, highlighting success. So anything we can do that highlights success in our staff or gives them kudos, or allows them to highlight their fellow staff members, which is even a better option. So what's something that your staff member did for you this week that you were so appreciative of? That's in and of itself an optimistic closure. They should be value driven, so they should align to like what you want to see as people's values and the mission of the organization that you work in. So you know, I don't think an optimistic closure fits for every person, but there's a style of optimistic closure that probably serves best the needs of your organization. So thinking about what are the values you want to instill, what do you want people talking about and thinking about, and then of course making them very intentional, which is kind of related to all the other things that I mentioned above about planning and thinking about obstacles that you have in front of you, and then kind of being intentional about how you put those optimistic closures and really the whole meeting agenda, kind of lining it up with what you want to see out of that team building experience. So ignore this because we're not going to be able to have time to do our activity, which I appreciate. I planned extra because I wasn't sure how the Zoom discussions would go. So I appreciate everybody kind of being willing to throw out a lot of input and feedback. That was great. So what I'd love you to do is in the chat, as we're doing kind of our roundup and doing a Q&A, just throw something into the chat that you think you'll do with your staff as a result of this meeting. Something you still have questions or concerns about or that wasn't addressed. And the thing that you're most looking forward to when you're out of quarantine. So it's a little bit easier to do this in like a discussion, but if you want to just kind of add these into like a couple different text boxes or just put them all into one, that would be awesome. And we'd love to kind of hear what you want to see out of this session when we do it again as well. So go ahead and use the chat for that, and thank you again. And essentially with that, I wanted just to give a quick summary of what we talked about today. And then I wanted to kind of hand it off for Q&A and just to have a little bit of time for survey. So here's what I think that we talked about today, and I hope I'm on the same track with y'all. Being proactive in defining, assessing, and cultivating team building opportunities. So looking at it as you would any key element of your organization, right? So, you know, getting stuff done is just as important as the process by which it gets done. So being mindful of the process and the proactivity in building that team. Being clear and specific in expectations, also willing to adapt. Being vulnerable, I heard that mentioned a couple times. You really want to share in your successes and your failures. A great way to get team building started off is say, you know, what's your biggest regret that isn't controversial maybe, or something like that. Or what's a recent failure that you're looking to address. So that can be a little more negative leading into positive. So sometimes even though you're going to get pushback, even though your staff might be a little bit hesitant on doing these things, they will recognize and appreciate the effort. And I heard someone who said like they're sitting in every morning waiting for people to show up to their chat. That's unfortunately like the best kind of work we can do, is just being there, being present, being able to be a voice and being a platform that will listen to people's concerns. So just showing up is like the #1 goal. And then just constantly being able to revise and revisit your strategies to best address your staff's needs. So with that, we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm putting up here our survey. It's a really short, should take you maybe 2 to 3 minutes. If you have any questions related to DQUAC, or you want to, I believe the PowerPoint, Melanie might correct me here, is coming to you all in an email. But if for some reason it doesn't come or you have additional questions, you can reach out to Melanie. Her email is here. I'm going to leave this up for a little bit, and then I'll provide my contact info at the end. And I've got a 2 pages of resources and links for you as well that will lead you to different activities and options that are both free and paid. So if you're looking for some brainstorming ideas, that will hopefully be a good start. So with that, I'd just like to hand it off to kind of, let's just go ahead and kind of jump in on the chat and just verbally if we have any questions, and we'll just try and make sure that, you know, we give everyone a turn to speak. So if anybody wants to jump in with some questions, feel free. And Melanie, I don't know if there's any questions in the chat anybody had, but
yeah, people are just kind of sharing responses to your prompt. I'll also flag, I put in the chat the link to the survey as well. You can go ahead and fill that out. And I do ask that you take a moment to fill that out. Adam is going to be facilitating this session again, so your feedback is super valuable to us as we sort of navigate that. Also, for those of you who are interested in getting a certificate of participation, in a follow-up email, I'll provide a link to this session, your certificate, and then a reminder about the survey if you didn't get a chance to fill that out yet. The survey is not active. Okay, let's see what we got here.
Well, while we're kind of closing out, just let me know if anybody else has any comments, feedback, questions. And then once we get, I'm going to leave the survey up for just another second, and then I'll have my contact info below. And then once again, those links will come out over email. So you'll have access to all those as we get done here.
Adam, this is Sandy Douglas. I clicked on the survey, but it didn't go through. What should happen? Am I doing something wrong?
If you want to, so it's up just kind of on the screen, but you actually can't click on the screen in the chat box. If you just copy and paste that link, that should go ahead and take you there. Okay. And I'm not sure why it's coming up like that for you. I pulled it up and it kind of loaded as normal, and it looks like a few other people were able to do it. So I can, in the follow-up email, I'll send another link to the survey, so hopefully it'll work there.
That would be great for me.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
I just shared it. I shared it again in the text box as well.
Okay, thanks.
Hopefully it might work in there. Well, great. Visit DQUAC.com. Many of you are already familiar with it, but essentially we're trying to keep this connection series going. I'm looking to do, I think in mid-May, another one of these sessions. And this is all new territory for me, both for the virtual space in terms of my own staff, but also the training elements here. So I'd love any honest, candid feedback you have to make this kind of a better experience. A lot of the strategies I tried today were brand new to me as well. So thanks again for just kind of providing that. And feel free to kind of take down my email if anything else comes up. And then these are some of the sources that I'll be sharing. Well, I guess Melanie will be sharing at the end of the session. So just to give you a sense of what you'll be getting, these are all basically articles and listicles and things like that have ideas for team building activities. There's one in here that's specifically about social emotional learning and how team building can be facilitated through that. So just thinking about kind of adapting this for, say, a classroom or a community you're working with. That one's the one that's called School Guide right here. I don't know if you can see my mouse. So it's about the fourth one down, FYI. And then I also have some free resources and some paid resources that you can take advantage of that are really easy, light lifts in terms of team building activities for you and your staff. The one that I wanted to highlight, just because I think it's awesome, is there's a GOAT2 meeting, which some of you might have heard of, which you can have a goat sit in on your Zoom meeting. So I think it goes to supporting like a local farm, and they also do petting zoo tours. So there's some really cool stuff out there in the virtual space, and there's always new things being added. So this is definitely not the most comprehensive or end-all be-all list. This is really just a starting point. So I guess with that, unless there's anything else that folks have questions about, I'll leave the chat open for another 5 minutes or so people can share out and we can collect everyone's feedback. But just thank you once again for being here today. Thank you for being present, for being willing to engage in kind of a unique, more interactive Zoom session and try out some of these activities. I really hope that this helps you in your team building efforts. I hope it's given you a little more structure, but also some resources and some ideas. So just the best of luck to y'all. I know that we're in a really crazy, weird kind of space right now for a lot of organizations. So hope everyone stays healthy and safe out there. And I'll be sticking around on the chat if there's any like individual questions folks have, but otherwise enjoy the rest of your weeks and days, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.